I always love seeing Tom Peace's landscapes. They're so alive, filled with color and movement and plants. Always a treat to see his work. Well, right now, we're going to whet your appetite with some things that will allow your garden to look a little bit like that this coming winter with lots of colorful plants. I'm joined by Mark and Kim Gaddy from Gaddy's Feed, Hardware, and Garden Center in Pflugerville. And welcome back to Central Texas Gardeners. Great to see you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I want to start off by letting people know about the business before we dive in and start talking about plants. And Mark, this has been a family business, and right now, if folks stop in the nursery, I understand they'll meet 3 generations of Gaddies.
On Saturdays, a lot of times you'll see 3 of us there, yes. My father, who started the business back in '73, and then I joined in, and then now my son now is 15. So you'll see 3 Mr. Gaddies. My daughter works there as well. She's 17.
3 Mr. Gaddies in one
betcha.
place. Okay. As long as they don't ask for pizza, you're in good shape.
That happens all the time.
I bet it does. I'll bet it does. Well, our subject today is winter color, and this is a lot of fun. This is something a lot of people really don't expect to be talking about during the winter time. But I know that in your area you have lots of people moving in from out of state and from all over the nation, and you get to introduce them to something that maybe they're not used to having back where they come from.
Oh, it's one of the great benefits of living here in Central Texas is that we can really expand our growing season if you plant the right things, prepare your soil the right way.
Right.
You can have color almost all year long.
Right. And I like the fact that you say prepare your soil the right way, because just plucking things into the ground here in Central Texas is usually not a good idea. That's a little bit of homework that a lot of folks from other places may need to learn.
Yes, especially if you're planting annuals and have annual beds where you're removing maybe something that was growing there this summer that you need to remove some of those annuals and plant winter color there. When you make that change, we recommend putting a couple inches of compost in that soil, working it in so that it will feed the plants through the winter.
Right, right. Working that soil season after season is really the only way to do these kind of annual beds, I think, and it makes all the difference in the world. And there's a lot of great choices, and you've brought some really cool things with you. Now, most of the plants that we're going to be talking about today are really sun lovers, so that's one thing that people can note. But we're going to start with one that is kind of the opposite, and this is one plant that really likes the shade, and that's cyclamen. And this has become a hugely popular plant in recent years. Used to be kind of a rarity, but does extremely well in the shade.
Oh, and it's beautiful. The foliage, too, these little heart-shaped leaves that are variegated are pretty, as well as the blooms that can give you good color throughout the winter months. And, of course, now it does like the cold weather.
Right.
So that this is one that you might want to hold off in planting until we truly do cool down in Texas. November,
for sure.
Yes, definitely.
But they can melt on these hot late fall days. But beautiful plant. The one thing that I would say on the cyclamen, lots of great color variation, and really eye-catching, popping color. But it's really important to have well-drained soil with those guys. So turn in the compost, maybe it's some kind of granite sand or something like that along with it. Now, moving to some plants for the sun, the ornamental cabbages and kales are a lot of fun to grow. And what kind of situations do you like using these in?
Well, you can put these in mass plantings directly into your landscape.
Right.
You can also have this as kind of an accent or backdrop plant in a container. I recommend kind of getting a larger one because they're kind of slow growing when you're planting them. Great thing about this plant is once we start really getting cold, sometimes it brings out some more color in it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now I brought, this was more green and purple. In purple, there's also some white varieties for it. They'll add a little different pop in your landscape.
Well, Mark, folks are always looking for fragrance in the garden, and we have hiding back here a great plant for fragrance in the wintertime. This is alyssum. Must be a popular one.
Right. It makes a very good edged plant for a planter container because it'll droop over the sides, and also makes a real good border plant for in your beds.
Yeah, that's exactly how I like to use it. Is tuck it in with some other plants, so it'll kind of drape over the edge of the pot or the hanging basket, and it's great for hanging baskets. It's right there at nose level,
Right.
And it's a very powerful fragrance. Some people, it's maybe a little strong for some people, but I love it, and it comes in a couple different color forms. And again, does great all the way through the winter. And it doesn't really expire until those first few hot days, and then it's just gone. But it'll go all the way through the spring. Coming up next here, one of my favorite plant families is the dianthus. And this is a great plant. It comes in many different forms. Some are annual, some are perennial. Love these plants. How do they perform for you?
Oh, well, this is just one of the hardest working plants. It's easy maintenance. You know, the great thing about this dianthus, this is the annual type of dianthus here, but a lot of times this will overwinter and then keep going right on into the spring and summer, and depending on what location you have it in. I really like this. And you can get there's a variety with red flowers mixed. It also has a nice shape to the plant.
Right. It's a very compact, tidy plant. It's easy to pinch off the spent blooms. Sometimes with some of the winter annuals, it requires a little bit of maintenance. You got to get in there and remove the faded blooms. This is a very easy one to do. And again, these deep, rich colors that you get are really special. And I have to admit, my favorite forms are the silver leaf forms, the perennials. Those are awesome, and they will sometimes last for a generation. I mean, I have one that's 20 years old that's in a container. But they are really terrific plants, so people should be on the lookout for all the different forms of dianthus. Right in here next to it, perfect foil for the dianthus, or a lot of the other plants that we're talking about, is Dusty Miller with this beautiful silver foliage. And this is another great winter sun plant, right?
Oh, yes, and you know, it will help make some of your other more color plants look even brighter in the garden.
Right.
Dusty Miller works well. I didn't bring one. The Artemisia is also another nice silver accent plant to have in your garden.
A little bit larger accent.
Yes.
A little more aggressive accent, but it's still a great accent plant, right? Yeah. And right beside that, we saw the cabbage. Then here we have an ornamental kale, and you can tell the difference because of the frilled ridges there. And great color on this one, and they perform really well in the same kind of situations, mass plantings or in containers. Now here we come to, I think, probably the most popular of the annuals for the wintertime, and it's the pansies and the violas. Now, what is your trick for when you tell customers how to grow them? What do you tell them?
Well, I mean, besides putting the compost and everything in the bed, blood meal works really well to make them grow and pop.
Yeah, I really think blood meal is a great addition. And this is one where I talked about the importance of maintenance a little bit. You know, I think the more you remove the faded blooms, the more blooms you'll get. So it's one of those things where if you have it in a hanging basket, getting in the habit of coming through and pinching off the faded blooms makes a big difference in terms of the amount of color that you get. And also seems to keep the plants more vibrant and alive longer into the springtime. But lots of the color variation on this is enormous. I mean, there's pretty much everything under the rainbow.
Oh, I only brought a few of the colors that they come in, and you know, so you can really pick a color that accents your house, your other landscaping.
Yeah. You just can't go wrong. And I have to submit, I have a particular love of the little violas, or Johnny jump-ups as they're sometimes called. And that just the smaller flower, but again, a big payoff in terms of the amount of blooms that you get from the plant. Just really terrific. We're going to continue over here with some plants that are edible. And these are things that, you know, I once did a whole garden of lettuce for the winter time in about 15 different varieties. And it was so much fun, all the different colors of the rainbow practically. And that's a really good thing for people to try during the wintertime here.
Oh, it's beautiful, and you can eat, depending on how you're spraying, you know, you can eat out of your flower beds as well.
Right.
That's a red lettuce, and as it grows, it might get a little deeper red
I'm sure
along the
it will.
edges.
Yeah.
And then that's just regular cabbage. And even though it doesn't have the same shape right now, it will develop a more round head of cabbage that just looks beautiful.
Yeah, and here's the
in a
cabbage
flower
right
garden.
here. And you're right, the form, the head of the cabbage itself is like a giant flower, and in essence that's what it is. And it's very attractive in the garden during the winter time as well. So these are a couple of other things that you can, and you don't have to have them all in a vegetable bed. You can mix them right in with the ornamentals, and it's a great way to go. Now, a few other things to think about are seeding things out right now, and this is a great time for that. And while we're talking about the edibles, let's start with talking about chard, because this has become very popular as a plant for both use as an edible, but also look at the color on some of these leaves. This is great.
Oh, vibrant, almost fluorescent stems and some of the varieties of the Swiss chard, and very hardy.
Yeah.
We've had some alive in our garden for 2 years now.
Yeah. Well, this is it's a wonderful thing to have, and it's delicious. I love chard, cooked in many different ways. Some people use it as like a wrap and they'll cook things in it. It's absolutely wonderful that way. And also, this is time for planting larkspur and so many other of the beautiful springtime flowers. So you can seed out now with these things.
Yeah, and you can't, you know, it's one of the things you have to think about doing now, because once you start thinking about spring, it's too late to get them started.
Okay, so folks can look for you at Gaddy's in Pflugerville, and we hope that people will do that. Thanks so much for being on Central Texas Garden.
Thank you.
All right, coming up next, it's time for Daphne.